It's a huge factor in the ranching business that affects profitability, and it's called cow longevity.
The more money they can make for you as productive members of the herd, the more money is in your pocket at the end of the day.
Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University is my guest today as we talk the economics of when that cow becomes a profit center, factors affecting longevity, and how we can increase the opportunity for that cow to be in our herd longer. On this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Welcome again, everyone, to another episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and we thank you for joining us. Now, if this is your first time listening to our program here today, first of all, I want to let you know where you can find us every Saturday and Sunday right here at 12 noon Eastern on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. Now, if you're the podcast listening type, well, you can find us on about every podcast provider out there. If you search under Working Ranch Radio Show, you will find us. And this is episode 39 in our podcast series. So not only can you listen to today's program again, but you can also go back and you can listen to previous shows as well, or share them on Facebook or Instagram, any of your social media. We'd appreciate that. We'd for sure if you'd share them out there if you like something, or shoot me back a comment as well. You can easily get a hold of me. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Easy way to reach out to me and let me know what you think, or if you have an idea for a topic on a show you'd like us to cover, feel free to do it there as well. Well, on our program today, I'm pleased to have Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University. She's a professor in the Department of Veterinary Clinical Sciences at the Purdue College of Veterinary Medicine as we get into the topic of cow longevity. And I will tell you, I've had a lot of discussions, and you probably heard them here on our show with a lot of the different breeds across the country here. This is one subject that comes up across many of the breed conversations that you will hear, is how do we improve cow longevity for the rancher? Of course, there's a lot of variables that go into that, but nevertheless, it still is something that is a huge economic element to our ranching business. And so I'm pleased to have Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue today to talk about that and a lot of the factors affecting that, the economics of that as well. Also, the Captain Tim O'Byrne will be by with his 2 cents, some advice for us as we're heading into the busy time of the shipping season. And meteorologist Don Day will join us in our last segment today as we look at the long-term weather. We're going to start to see some change in the weather for the near term, but long term, is it lining up to the Old Farmer's Almanac? That's a question I'll ask meteorologist Don Day for our weather segment. Well, right now, a thank you to our sponsors of the Working Ranch Radio Show, the American Simmental Association. And the American Simmental Association believes that one of their primary purposes for existence is genetic evaluation and then providing genetic awareness tools that help producers make decisions that will improve or move their operations forward. From maternal traits to terminal traits, the genetic merit of Simmental genetics providing increased profitability back to the rancher. SimGenetics, profit through science. Find out more at simmental.org. Biozyme, protect and recovery with VitaCharge by Biozyme. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-charge. Performance Beef. Find Performance Beef online to learn more and request a demo. And Hargrove Insurance, providing pasture, range, and forage insurance to ranchers across the nation. You can contact Hargrove Ranch Insurance at 325-573-8975 for a free custom quote, or check them out online at hargroveinsurance.com. Well, now let's check in with the captain, Tim O'Byrne, publisher and editor of Working Ranch Magazine, for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents.
Hey, everybody out there in Radio Land. Hey, Justin, I think it's a good time right about now to remind everybody that you need to take a good hard look at your stock trailer back there. Make sure that the brakes are working properly, make sure the tires are not over or underinflated, the wheel bearings are greased, and very important, make sure the lights are all working, and check that spare. Make sure she's aired up too, because you never know. You don't want to be pulling it out of the rack and find out that it's been flat for the last 9 years. So that's my 2 cents. Justin, take it away.
All right. Well, Captain, so you're telling me my trailer has brakes that are supposed to work? Well, actually, I really don't seem to have much of a problem with the brakes and the lights working on my trailer, but my dadgum pickup brake controller, doggone, that's another issue. Anyway, well, thanks again, Captain, for a little reminder for us to stay safe out there as we are finding ourselves in the busy time of the year with trailers up and down the highway. Well, don't go away. When we come back, we'll get into our featured topic today on cow longevity. Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University joining us. And then in our very last segment today of our program, meteorologist Don Day back with a look at our long-term weather. Don't go away. You're listening to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Starting off in the right direction is essential to gaining an advantage later when you go to market your calves. And I have proof that the right direction is with Sim Angus sired calves. A 2020 study by K-State showed that Sim Angus sired steer calves earn more at sale time than all other breed identified sire groups with at least 50 lots represented on Superior Livestock's 2020 summer sales. The proof's right there. For low-risk, high-potential calves with earning potential, be confident that Genetics will give you more per head, period. Stand strong, Simmental. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and our featured interview today is brought to you by Biozyme. Protect and recovery with VitaCharge by Biozyme. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. Well, as I said at the top of the program, our featured interview topic today is on cow longevity, and it's really a topic that has come up more and more as I think about it from my own commercial cow-calf operation here and also in talking with registered to purebred operators all the way up to breed associations. And so it's something that I think if we're going to be honest with each of ourselves in looking at our own respective operations, that it is something that's costing us a lot of money. And so my guest today is Dr. Bethany Funnell out of Purdue University. Now, she originally got her degree from Purdue University and then went into practice at the University of Minnesota North Central Research Outreach Center and was the coordinator for Reproductive Biotechnology Center. Now, in 2014, Dr. Funnell returned back to Purdue University and is currently a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Veterinary Clinical Sciences at the Purdue College of Veterinary Medicine. Her and her husband Mike currently operate a small herd of registered cattle in northern Minnesota, as well as a small row crop enterprise. So with that, I would like to welcome my guest today, Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University. And Dr. Funnell, thanks for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, Dr. Funnell, as you and I talked before our interview today, I explained kind of the direction or where I was coming from and why I wanted to cover this topic of beef cow longevity. And I reached out to you because I know you've done some research on this and have some other expertise in this field as well. But personally for me, I look at this as a hidden cost to our industry that a lot of times gets overlooked because we really don't do a great job of laying it out on paper and really following it through and seeing the reality of actually what is happening in regards to culling our cows versus what we think or what we hope is going on. And so I come back to that the economics of beef cow longevity really is a major cost to our industry.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the challenges that we deal with, and I've dealt with it personally myself, my husband and I have our own cattle as well, and when we retain replacement heifers, what a lot of producers don't understand is that heifer basically owes you money for keeping her in the herd. And that the money that she owes you is what her value would be as a feeder calf. That's money that you are not able to put in your bank account because you retained her as a replacement. And so that's one of the first costs that I think is unrecognized. And we talk a lot about development costs and that sort of thing, so we can tally those up, but it's that initial value that I think gets missed a lot. And, with today's markets, if the value of a feeder calf now is around $900, automatically that heifer basically has a $900 note against her, plus her initial fee, first year development costs, which is going to be, depending on where you are, maybe around $450. So by the time she's a year of age, that heifer, and she's not even bred yet, by the way, that heifer owes you about $1,350 as a producer. So looking at those as simply, I just have feed into this heifer is a little bit erroneous, because we're missing that opportunity cost that that we gave her by keeping her in the herd.
Mm-hmm. And I think along the same lines as that opportunity cost there is knowing that well, I've already got the hay, or I've already got the feed, and we're not charging our enterprise back that feed cost. If we had to charge that feed cost back and really see a number to that, and we need to, there would be a real understanding of what is also the input cost going into that heifer.
That's correct. And one of the things that's just absolutely critical for longevity of a beef cow is how well she's developed as a heifer. So again, looking at not just the value of the hay and other, forages that are available, but then any additional supplement that has to go into that heifer to get her developed to a proper weight for breeding also needs to be counted in that. Mm-hmm. And then once we get past that year of age, we finally, in her first, spring as a yearling, she's going to get inseminated, whether it's artificially or by a bull by natural service. And then she's out on pasture and grazing, taking in feedstuffs that another, perhaps cow could be consuming. So that is a cost that needs to be factored in, pasture rental and pasture availability. And then, again, she's got to go through another entire winter of feed before she's even going to have her first calf. So just by running some simple numbers with today's values, that heifer would, by the time she had her first calf, she would owe the ranching enterprise $1,800. And by the time she actually, if you consider pasture costs for her second pasture, and then breeding costs and veterinary costs and such, by the time she actually would wean her first calf, she owes the enterprise about $2,000. So if we look at then she weans her first calf, and let's just, again, for rough figures, assume that first calf is worth $900. Now she still has an outstanding balance of $1,100. And if we continue on with kind of a standard $450 annual cost per cow, and the $900 value of each calf weaned, it takes her roughly to the sale of her fourth calf before she actually starts turning a profit, and that makes her 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And that's a very, very long time that I don't think a lot of producers really recognize that they need their cows to be at least 6 years of age before they're turning a profit for the enterprise.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're probably being pretty generous to us as ranchers to say that our annual cost to run a cow is going to be $450 a year. Nevertheless, though, as you said, this cow is going to be over 6 years old before she then becomes a profit maker in our cow-calf enterprise. And so the next thing I begin to think of, so what's the average age of in our U.S. cattle herds of cows being culled? And I know we have some newer data out there, but in the proceedings that I read from an NAVC conference back in 2013, when you presented a topic on the economics of beef cow longevity, you cited data gathered from an Angus herd in Wyoming and then a Hereford herd in Arizona, and it was 30 years worth of data from the late 1950s to the late 1980s, and the average cow age that was culled just over 6.5 to 7 years of age.
Correct. Yes, they were actually barely paying for themselves before they were removed on as cull cows. And I would really honestly would love to challenge each of your listeners to look at their average age across their cow herd, and see what percentage of cows are over that 6 years of age. Because those are their profit makers, those are the cows that are really bringing in money. And then look at the number of cows that are less than 6 years of age and what the distribution of that is. You will really see that a lot of cows will fall out of the herd right at about their after they wean their first calf, and sometimes after they wean their second calf, depending on the management practices. And so, a lot of headway can be made with managing some of those younger cows earlier on. And another thing that we can't forget about as well in the balance sheet is what that cow's value herself is as a cull cow. Because even if she's 6 years old, and she's making that, profit, we'll say just for easy numbers, math that I was working with, $250 profit, but then there's also her value. And so, if you were to turn around and sell that cow and she's in good shape, and I'm going to, assume that maybe she's a, 1,500 pound cow. That's kind of the average cow size over in our area, probably a little bit smaller out in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. But, she might be worth $1,000. And so she could be profiting, if you sold that cow immediately, she could be profiting you, $1,250 at that point.
Yeah.
But it does not decrease the need to keep these cows in the herd longer, because the more money they can make for you as productive members of the herd, the more money is in your pocket at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And I know for me, trying to put some reality to this and understand it from a perspective that I can put some numbers to, and it's an example that I've shared with other folks I've had discussions with other people about this. But if we were to take 100 head of bred heifers, and in 4 years, how many of those would be left in the herd? I think, honestly, we would be startled to realize how much of fallout that we are seeing in our cattle.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I can't give you any specific numbers right now, but we did have an integrated resource management program here for beef cattle in the state of Indiana. And I went through some of the numbers for some of the herds, and I was really surprised to see how low the percentages were in those herds of cows that were over 6 years of age.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University is my guest today, and we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we've talked the economics. Now we're going to be talking about what are the practices, what are some of the things that we can do that will help us retain these cattle in our herd longer. We'll be back with more on the Working Ranch Radio Show. It's weaning time, one of the biggest days of the year for you and the most stressful for your calves. Ensure a smooth transition with the VitaCharge Weaning Program. This two-step program with the AmmoFirm Advantage gives calves the nutritional boost they need to get through the first weeks of weaning, accelerate appetite, increase weight gain, and improve health. It's weaning time. Get them ready with VitaCharge. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and this segment is brought to you by Performance Beef, easy-to-use cattle management software. So how do you manage data for your cattle business? Well, you can stop relying on pen and paper or complicated programs and get real-time access from anywhere with Performance Beef. You can update rations, generate real-time closeout reports, record health data right there at the chute or in the pen or out in the pasture, or you can analyze performance trends all in one place with ease. Your feed, financial, and health information all integrated in one easy-to-use platform accessible from your computer or your smartphone or your tablet. Find Performance Beef online to learn more and request a demo. Well, our featured subject today is on cow longevity, and my guest is Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University. And if you're just joining us in the first segment with our conversation, Dr. Funnell talking about the economics of how long a cow is in a herd before she begins to pay for herself. And Dr. Funnell, I want to go now because we've laid out the fact that we need to keep these cattle in our herds longer than that 6-year mark where they become a profit center for our operations. So from your perspective, what are some of the things that we could be doing to help retain these cattle in our herd longer?
There's a few things that play a role. Genetics makes a big difference, and heifer development also makes a big difference. There's some odds and end things, for instance, temperament. If you got to have cows that you can live with. Some of those cows that get really aggressive at calving or are hard to deal with in handling facilities or anything like that, those cows typically don't survive long in at least operations mm-hmm. where there's a fair bit of hands-on with the cattle. So sometimes cows will get, removed from the herd for reasons other than she's open or a fertility issue. But we can do things to try to minimize that. Mm-hmm. Genetics, when I'm talking about genetics, there's fertility is lowly heritable. And so that's a really hard thing to select for. Sometimes some of the best advice is to keep heifers out of old cows that have proven their fertility, cows that have proven that they can stick around in the herd for a long time. I think feet and leg structure is something that a lot of breed associations are really kind of having to, face the music and really take a hard look at structural soundness. I'm the official veterinarian for the Indiana Beef Evaluation Program, which is a bull test. And we have a breeding soundness committee that evaluates the structural soundness of every bull that comes through our program. And in the last few years, we have seen some structural abnormalities that really come to the forefront, and we have a hard, we're tough on them. Yeah. And some of our consigners are really, challenged by that, but we need to pay real close attention to feet and legs. Otherwise, for the most part, they're heritable. So if you have a foot structure problem in a bull, you use that bull on your cow herd and you keep replacements out of them, you're putting that back into your herd. And his daughters are going to have issues ambulating out in pasture. And if you have large pastures, that's not a good thing. So that's one of the things I think that is really starting to come to the forefront as far as seed stock producers and as far as the bull studs are concerned. The breed associations themselves, Angus Association, is really working hard on developing a fairly objective foot scoring system that can be utilized on the ranch to try to get a better handle on, foot shape and any defects that are associated with that.
Then, of course, another factor that I see creating some fallout would be their ability to stay milking and the soundness of that udder.
Udder scores are now becoming a more common thing for beef cows. You stay away from, if you avoid selecting cows with quality udders, then udders can really fall apart. And of course, in a young cow, in a heifer, you can't tell. You don't know what her udder is going to look like. It's not until she has, and not even after she has her first calf, there might be some indications that maybe she's not going to have a very good udder when she calves the first time. But it's usually later on in life that bad udders are really manifested. And so that makes it really tough. It's something that is very, very difficult to select for in the young female. And that's a scenario where we can get into, quite a bit of problems in an entire, age range of cows. For instance, it was the 2014 heifers out of this particular bull have terrible udders, and now those girls are going to fall out of the herd at a much quicker rate. Yeah. So that's another piece of the genetics puzzle that plays a significant role in cow longevity.
Earlier, you'd said that fertility was a lowly inheritable trait, but I know there's some other elements around that can influence some of that. So I'd like you to expand on that a little bit more, if you could.
We talked about fertility as a really lowly heritable trait and really hard to select for, but then, is that a genetic thing or is that an epigenetic thing? I'm not sure how many of your listeners have been exposed to epigenetics or fetal programming or fetal development. But basically the concept is that the environment in which the embryo gestates is going to have a major impact on adult phenotype of that particular individual. So a great study that was published here fairly recently out of the Meat Animal Research Center showed that heifers that had large ovaries also produced more proteins in their uterus, which means that heifers that were gestated in cows that had adequate nutrition also had more competent uteri. So the fertility of those offspring heifers was determined by their mother's nutritional status in gestation, particularly in the first trimester of gestation. And so with fertility being so incredibly important, one of the things I think we need to pay attention to is how we feed our cows. particularly those young cows. Not only is it going to be good for them to keep them in the herd, to keep them in good condition and help them reproduce, but it will also pay dividends in their offspring's fertility. So that's some of the really fascinating research that's coming out right now associated with fertility in beef cattle.
Yeah. So as you talk about the data coming out about the epigenetics that's showing we can give these embryos a good start with proper nutrition that then later on ties into a potential brood cow in our herd. The thought that's, I guess, coming through my head is this, because for me, my cows have to be profitable. My operation has to be profitable. And I really can't afford to be putting $800 into a cow every year. So where is the balance in this? And a lot of that cost in an annual cost is feed. And so how do we keep our inputs down on this cow, but yet give her the opportunity to stay in the herd through the right feed, the nutrition, and of course then improving the longevity of our cow herd?
Right. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And so we can be a little bit more strategic about how we feed cattle. So if you think about the first trimester, that's really kind of the critical time where we want to make sure we've got good nutrition in front of those cows, because not only have they, they've had a calf, so they've started a lactation, so they're trying to feed a calf, and they're trying to get their uterus, involuted down and healed up, and get to cycling so that they can get pregnant within, 80 to 85 days of their calving date. And then through the first 100 days of that gestation, that's when nutrition is critical. So those, if you're going to really focus on nutrition and really kind of, try to be as diligent as you can, that would be the time that I would suggest it. In mid-gestation, there's some other things that happen. So there's a lot of cell division and cell expansion cell population expansion during the second trimester, particularly of muscle and bone and that sort of thing. So the total muscle cells is going to be dictated during the second trimester of gestation. And then the third trimester of gestation is just simply growth of the cells that are existing, specifically muscle, skeletal, and fat and some of the other proteins. The interesting thing about reproduction is the structures that ultimately become either the ovaries or the testes. They pretty well complete all of their division within the first 100 days. Okay. And then they start to organize and start to lose the what's referred to as the gonatocyte, or the cell that either is going to become a sperm cell in the male or an egg or oocyte in the female. So that's dictated way at the first part of gestation. So, when you're speaking about fertility, that is the time where you can really impact the fertility of the offspring.
Something that, as you were talking about that, and in light of this year, there's been a large portion of the country that's been in a drought situation. And so I kind of throw this question out there. Do we want to be keeping replacement heifers out of drought-yeared cattle?
That is such an excellent question. That is an absolutely excellent question. And the challenge as well with that is, with the cows that, in a drought situation, we're often dealing with cows that are nutritionally challenged and potentially a greater percentage of cows that are open.
Yeah.
And so then you run into, perhaps the market is going to shift. We're going to see decreases in market prices because the market's flooded with open cows. And it really begs the question then of going back to the economics, are you better off keeping a heifer calf that's just weaned, or are you better off from an economic standpoint of keeping a young but open cow? And, you think about the impact on that heifer, that maybe was going through that stress of the drought. And, the cow can gain weight back quicker. Yeah. She's already proven that she can be fertile, in this unusual drought circumstance. That's not something that she can control. It's not something that the rancher can control. So you have to weigh the economics, and every individual ranch is going to have to determine what's going to work the best for them. It may be such a thing that the economics say that you're better off selling those feeder calves and keeping an open cow. which if you keep an open cow, you actually have to keep her for an additional 2 years in order for her to pay for that year that she got to stick around and stay open. Yeah. So definitely situation specific, ranch specific, and it's going to take some serious number crunching to determine what the correct approach would be for each individual operation.
We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University as we're talking today, our subject on cow longevity. And if you think this is an important issue for us as ranchers, I will tell you another group of folks that believe it's very important, and that is your breed associations. We're going to talk about it when we come back after this. You're listening to the Working Ranch Radio Show on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Animal health is key to your business. So how do you track cattle health treatments? Well, stop relying on pen and paper or complicated programs. Performance Beef helps you record processing data, enter costs, and track animal health history all in real time at the chute. The mobile app also makes it easy to log pasture and pen treatments on the go. Your health data is integrated with feed and financial information in one easy-to-use platform, accessible from your computer, smartphone, or tablet. Find Performance Beef online to request a demo. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm your host, Justin Mills. My guest today, Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University, and our subject is on cow longevity. And if you're just joining us and you've missed part of this program, some really good stuff that we've had up to this. I'm not going to rehash a lot of it, but I would encourage you, if you want to go back and listen to it, you can go to our podcast site at any podcast provider that's out there. If you just search under Working Ranch Radio Show, you'll find it. It will come up there. This is episode 39 in our podcast series. But as we continue our conversation with Dr. Bethany Funnell today on cow longevity, Dr. Funnell, I've had a lot of conversations with several of the different breed associations that represent breeds that we see here all across the country. And one of the subjects that always comes up is longevity. That's a big deal to a lot of them. And I know for many of the associations, they're starting to build EPDs or put numbers in their EPDs that reflect that longevity in the cow. I think one of them that I've seen in a lot of the EPDs is stayability. Can we rely on those numbers?
Oh, that is a big question. That is an excellent question. So another thing that we have to consider too is the breed associations have developed EPDs, but if you turn to the dairy industry, they have used genomics to their advantage. They have really, really delved into genomics, and they have been able to come up with some pretty solid data. The challenge with the beef industry is it's really, really hard to get all that genomics information put together. Mm-hmm. Dairy cows are handled every day. They produce a product twice a day, every day, and so cash flow is very important, and so efficiency really becomes super important. With beef cows, number one, beef cows are not confined as a rule. Mm-hmm. Cows are out on pastures. That's where, the beef cow exists. And so what works in one operation may not work in another. We can look at the typical beef cow in the state of Indiana. If you brought her out to Wyoming, she would wither away to nothing. And you bring a Wyoming cow out to Indiana, and if she didn't bust through everybody's fences, she would get hog fat and never get bred again. So, the different environments really dictate what kind of animals we need to have. Mm-hmm. So that makes it very, very challenging when we can't utilize genomics to the extent that the dairy associations and the dairy breeds can. Mm-hmm. Should we abandon genomics altogether? No, I think there's some tools there that we can utilize if we can get organized and get enough data and enough samples put together that we can develop some reliable markers and some reliable predictions.
And your reference there about finding cows that fit your environments being very important. Along those same lines, when we look at this issue of longevity, is there a factor that you would go back to that you feel is important in getting this cow to be retained in this herd longer, have more longevity in our herds? Something that you would root that back to in her lifespan that gives her that opportunity to be that profit center for us down the road?
Some of the things that really kind of influence ultimately, a cow's fit for a particular environment, and how well she does in that environment is, it's going to be the development process. I think that's something that we can't ignore and we can't downplay. Developing heifers is, it's kind of an art. Mm-hmm. The trick with it is, number one, we don't want heifers to get too fat, but also we don't want heifers to develop too slowly that they can't get pregnant in an appropriate time frame. We want those girls to have their first estrus at least by 13 months of age so they can get pregnant by 15 months of age in order for them to stay on track. And, one of the things that we've noticed, again, some newer data coming out of the International Embryo Technology Society, is they found that it happens in high-producing dairy cows, but it also happens in developing beef heifers that are on a high-starch ration.
Okay.
The challenge with those high starch rations is when they consume a lot of starches, that kicks up their liver metabolism, just generally speaking. They're processing all of the starches and the liver just gets to rolling. The problem is the liver is the location where the steroid hormones are processed and excreted. Mm-hmm. And if the liver is increasing its metabolism of those steroid hormones, then it takes a little bit longer to get the normal hormonal axis functioning properly. So heifers that are on a high starch or high, developing, high plane of nutrition, high developing ration, they are going to have fertility issues. So having those heifers on something that's more forage based, that still meets their growth needs as far as energy is concerned, and protein as well, but not getting into the point where you're starting to get aberrations in the hormonal axis. Then you're going to be more likely to get those girls pregnant. And first, the age at first breeding, or the age at first pregnancy for heifers, is going to be a significant dictator in where they end up falling out of the herd. Mm-hmm. So if a heifer gets pregnant on the first insemination, she's much more likely to stick around in the herd for much longer, barring any, major aberrations like a massive drought or something like that causes her to lose condition and lose her ability to reproduce, or if she's got bad feet that, you didn't see before. If a heifer gets bred late in the breeding season, she's going to get bred late in every subsequent breeding season, and she's going to fall out of the herd in a big hurry. Mm-hmm. So I really like the production scenarios in which, basically all the heifers can be retained up until their first breeding. And let's say they're around 900 pounds to 1,000 pounds. Those that don't become pregnant, they can just go on in the feeder calf markets, sure. As sold as yearlings be fed out as yearlings. And those that are pregnant then can stay in the herd and continue on through the development process. Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a break here, and we've got one more segment coming up with Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University as we are talking on the subject of cow longevity. The question we're going to address next is the age-old question of, do I raise my replacements or should I buy them? We're going to talk about that with Dr. Funnell when we return. We'll be back with more on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Coming to the Las Vegas Convention Center, December 8th, 9th, and 10th, it's the Working Ranch Expo, brought to you by Working Ranch Magazine. It's thousands of feet of space filled with the ranch industry's leading equipment manufacturers and suppliers, plus great speakers that will inspire and educate you. And we're in the hall just across from Cowboy Christmas. Register to attend at WorkingRanchExpo.com. It's Working Ranch Expo by day, NFR by night. We'll see you at the Expo. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and we thank you for joining us on our program today. My guest is Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University. Our subject has been on cow longevity, and we've covered a lot of topics up to now, and we continue now with the age-old question, Dr. Funnell, of should I raise the replacements out of my own cow herd, or should I be buying them? And I know there's pros and cons to both. There's some market factors that can play into some of that. But from your expertise, is there any light you could shed on that topic for us?
My perspective would be, kind of twofold. Number one, what can you get heifers bought for compared to what you can raise them yourselves? Mm-hmm. That's going to be kind of one of the first things is, can you buy heifers for less than you can raise them for? And if that's the case, then that may be the better option. Having said that, if you buy heifers for less than what you can raise them for, but those heifers don't work in your environment and in your production system, then that was not a good investment. Sure. And then it might be worth more to put that money up front in raising your own heifers than it is to go out and buy those. Now, when we talk about replacements too, one of the things that, we automatically assume maybe heifers, but you can buy cows. Mm-hmm. That is another option, is to buy cows and use those cows as replacements. So every circumstance is going to be a little bit different.
You bet. With our featured topic today being on cow longevity, we've covered a lot of different aspects that all play into and come back to our featured topic today. And so as we kind of wrap things up, I would like for you to just give us a brief synopsis of, when we talk about cow longevity and in your experience and in your research that you have seen, what would the advice you would leave us as ranchers about this issue and about addressing cow longevity in each of our operations?
I think that I think we're leaving a lot of money on the table by losing cows before they really start to turn us a profit. We can't be afraid of older cows. Older cows are really profitable cows. The toughest time to get a cow pregnant is after she's had her first calf. While she's still trying to grow, she's trying to lactate, and she's trying to reproduce. So focusing our attention from an economic standpoint on some of those younger cows to try to get them pregnant a little bit sooner and make sure they don't fall out of the herd. And we can do some simple management things as well to try to get that done without, a huge cost, even something as simple as, having our first calf heifers pastured with our yearling heifers as opposed to with the mature cows. That can really make a big difference. And then heifer development, giving those girls every chance that you can within reason to become pregnant, and keep only those that really look like they're going to have the best fertility, get pregnant early in the breeding season. Those girls are more likely to stay in the herd and continually be early, calving early in the breeding season. Don't keep anything that gets bred late in the breeding season, because they will continue to calve late every year. Focused attention of resources on the critical points, I think, is probably the biggest thing. Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Funnell, I want to thank you for joining us here today, covering a topic that really has a lot of different points to it, and we got to a lot of those today, but I do want to thank you for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
I have really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and I wish the best of luck to all of your listeners.
Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University, my guest today on our program as we talk on this issue of cow longevity. And the thing that I guess that I think about with all of this is I think one of the problems that we have as ranchers, and I'm going to just point back to myself, is that we think our herd is an exception to the rule. And as she was sitting there talking about the topic of retaining heifers, and if they don't breed up in that first cycle, and if they're late breeding, they're always going to be late calving or late breeders and eventually fall out of our herd. I'm thinking to myself, I'll keep these late ones. My cattle are an exception to this. I can get them caught up. But the science is there, and I think sometimes we think, again, our herds are an exception to the rule, that we can catch it up, that there's factors that we can make up for it. And when the reality of it is the data is there, the science is there to know that there are factors that affect that longevity. And if we want to see that improve in our cow herd, we're going to have to make some tough decisions within our cow herd. And I'm saying that as much to myself, folks, as I am anybody else out there. But again, a great subject today that I hope with our conversation with Dr. Funnell really shed some light on it and really create some thinking out there among us, because I know it did for me. Our featured interview today brought to you by Biozyme. Protect and recovery with VitaCharge by Biozyme. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, meteorologist Don Day joins us with a look at our long-term weather when we return on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Ranching has been in the Hargrove family for generations, and they know the value of keeping a ranch in the family. Hargrove Ranch Insurance provides pasture, range, and forage insurance to ranchers across the nation. PRF Insurance is a USDA subsidized program that allows ranchers to insure against the risk of below-average rainfall. Hargrove Ranch Insurance utilizes industry-leading custom software to provide the rancher with information they need to stay up to date and educated on their policy throughout the year. Hargrove Ranch Insurance supports ranchers for this generation, the next, and those yet to come. Contact Hargrove Ranch Insurance at 325-573-8975 for a free custom quote, or online at hargroveinsurance.com. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm your host, Justin Mills. Our weather segment brought to you by Hargrove Insurance, providing pasture, range, and forage insurance to ranchers across the nation. You can contact Hargrove Ranch Insurance at 325-573-8975 and request that free custom quote, or you can check them out online at hargroveinsurance.com. Well, joining me now is meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. And Don, you've been telling us all along here that as we get to the latter part of September, that we are going to see a fairly significant weather change. And we're going to talk about some different portions of the country, because I know most of that colder air is going to be in the northwestern part of the country. We'll talk about the Southwest and the South in a bit. But first of all, that is going to happen as you are seeing. And how significantly colder are we going to be looking at?
Well, based on how warm it's been this summer, especially across the northern plains and the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be a significant change. It's not unusual at all as you go right at that time frame of the last 10 days of September into early October. You usually expect something to cut loose from those northern latitudes. You know, those nights are getting longer up there and those days are getting shorter. And so you just build up that cold air and things start to change and get more active. So we are going to go from a pretty warm pattern across a good portion of the lower 48 states to a pattern as we go into next week that is certainly going to be cooler. And it'll be felt first in the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia, Alberta, then it'll spill into the northern and central Rockies by early next week. And I do see that a good portion of the northern United States by the middle to the end of the week will all feel a little taste of fall. We could even see some snow in the higher northern Rockies with this system.
Mm-hmm. When I look at your kind of a 10-day, 14-day forecast of average weather or average temperature, we're seeing what we just talked about in the northwest, northern tier of the country. But when we look in the south, down into Texas, New Mexico, Texas, and even into everything looks like almost east of the Missouri River, they're looking at above average temperatures.
That's right. When you see an area of low pressure, a dip in the jet stream take place in the northwest and northern areas of the United States, that actually creates high pressure and warmer conditions downstream, or that would be over the east coast of the United States. So that's one thing that you can kind of watch throughout the course of a season, is that when low pressure is in the west, it's warm in the east. So that's exactly what will happen. And for the Gulf Coast areas, Tropical Storm Nicholas brought more rain to the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana, and there is going to be more subtropical air. So we'll be warm and very muggy and wet in the south central and southeastern areas of the United States, while we see that colder weather and that more moisture go into the northern areas of the U.S. You know, one thing that we may see, Justin, and we did see this late last week, is we may see rain again in parts of Oregon, Washington, and even Northern California. They got a little bit, and they may get a bit more out of this weather pattern change. And that would certainly be great news for those western wildfires. You
bet. So if we're in a La Nina pattern this year, as we were last year, it was a little bit milder October, November. Is that what we're going to see this year as well?
I think we will, because historically, Octobers and into early November can be warmer than normal for a lot of the United States during La Nina. And I think that is going to kind of fit into how the early winter season is going to go, which is with La Nina gaining strength. And we just looked at some new data that shows that those sea surface temperatures are cooling off again. That could lead to some milder than normal conditions for most of the 48 states in October and November. Now, that's not to say there will be interruptions and there'll be cold fronts and some winter weather at times. But on the whole, I think the fall season for many areas of the U.S. will end up being warmer than normal.
Mm-hmm. It seems like whenever there's conversation amongst farmers or ranchers about weather, they always say, well, this is what the Old Farmer's Almanac says. So the Old Farmer's Almanac is saying that January and February are going to have moisture. And I haven't necessarily heard that from you. I've heard you say it's going to be colder potentially with transitioning out of La Nina. But what are you seeing for January, February across the country?
Well, I certainly think the potential is there. Namely because if we go back to our analog forecasting tools, in patterns that we've seen like this before, if we do see this mild start to winter, one thing that we've seen before is that you tend to see the second half of the winter get a little bit more severe when you see the La Nina continuing into the early winter, then beginning to fade. And that sets in motion a lot of things with the interactions with our oceans and the other dynamic things that'll happen as the sea surface temperatures change. So to lend a little credence to the Farmer's Almanac, I do think the northern parts of the United States in January and February could be in for a rough ride. Now, I'm certainly confident with the cold in that forecast for January and February. The snow is always a bit of a wild card because you have some things that can fall together because you can be plenty cold in January and February in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and Montana, but not have a lot of snow. So a lot of times they don't go hand in hand. But I'm certainly confident that the first 3 months of 2022 for a large portion of the northern and central United States is going to be cold.
All right. Well, I hate to leave everyone with the foreshadowing of what could be potentially be kind of a rougher January and February, but it's always good to have some forewarning with that. So, Don, thanks for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Don't shoot the messenger.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. By the way, you can check out his daily video podcast on his website at dayweather.com. Weather Today brought to you by Hargrove Ranch Insurance, providing pasture, range, and forage insurance to ranchers across the nation. Contact Hargrove Ranch Insurance at 325-573-8975 for a free custom quote, or you can check them out online at hargroveinsurance.com. Well, I'd like to thank my guests for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show, Dr. Bethany Funnell with Purdue University, as we talked about the issue on cow longevity. Also to the captain, Tim O'Byrne, with his 2 cents. A thank you to our sponsors as well, the American Simmental Association. Heterosis works, which is why with Simmental, it's more per head, period. Find out more at simmental.org. Biozyme, protect and recovery with VitaCharge by Biozyme. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. Performance Beef. Find Performance Beef online to learn more and request a demo. Hargrove Ranch Insurance, providing pasture, range, and forage insurance to ranchers across the nation. Give them a call. Check them out online for a free custom quote, hargroveinsurance.com. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine. You can join us right here every Saturday and Sunday at 12 noon Eastern on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM, or on your podcast provider. Thanks again for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm your host, Justin Mills. And until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.